Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Real Talk, where we have real conversations with real people who have and continue to overcome adversity. In today's episode, I talk with Dexter Moscow, an entrepreneur and author of The Voyage Without My Father, a book about his journey of healing from losing his father when he was 10 years old. In our conversation, we discuss ways we can work through the grief and pain of losing a loved one, a lesson he learned after breaking down emotionally 35 years after the loss of his father. What I appreciate about Dexter is his commitment to helping others live better lives, which is shown through not only his book about his father, but also through his work as a mentor and coach to others in their professional careers. Today, I'm honored to introduce you to Mr. Dexter Moscow. Dexter, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Keith, I'm doing very well today because here in the UK, it's just about 5:30 and the weather has been wonderful. So we're all very good here. How about you? How are things going with you?
You know, the weather is wonderful here, and I haven't made one mistake this morning. And so I would say that today is going to be amazing.
It's going to be a good day. Fantastic.
You know,
lovely to be here with you.
Yeah. If you can go 1 hour mistake free, I think you're probably going to have an amazing day.
I can't claim that today because we're virtually towards the end of the day. There have been errors today.
Awesome. Well, it is no mistake that we have this opportunity to connect and to talk about your story. And I'm excited to have you here because I think that your book and everything that you represent will bring so much value to the people that are listening in on the podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about your origin story and where you come from, what you do professionally, a little bit about, you becoming an author and things like that, so that we can dive into your story?
Thank you. And I really do appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about my book and that it is so heartfelt. My origin story happened quite a few years ago now. And the book actually talks about how when I was just 10, I lost my dad. He was only 45. And at a time when kids were not allowed to go into hospital wards to say goodbye, that was my situation. And my lifelong regret, and realistically, this is what's happened to so many people with this pandemic, not being able to say goodbye to their loved ones. So my origin story started there from the age of 10 with this kind of regret and sadness. And my dad, I realized, because of the stories that were told about him, wanted to be a copywriter. And I don't know if you know the song. It's called "The Living Years" by Mike and the Mechanics. And there is a lyric in it which says, "We are held hostage to our parents' hopes and fears." And my early life was in advertising. And I was very lucky to be taken in literally by a mentor to the first American agency that came to England called Papert, Koenig and Lewis. And I suppose my story then is quite linear. That's where my love of words started. I was made redundant after a number of years in advertising because cigarette advertising was banned on television. And overnight, we lost £2 million worth of billing. And that was a lot of money a long time ago. And from there, I went with my brother and helped him build an estate agency, a realty business. And I started to train negotiators, what we call property negotiators. Those are the guys that go out and sell properties and take people around the properties, the houses. And that's when I first started my kind of coaching and training. And then I was approached by a friend after I'd left my brother's practice and opened my own business. And he approached me and said, would I sell some property or some products for him on QVC, the shopping channel? And I didn't realize, because it was new to this country. QVC is big in the States, as you know. And I didn't realize it was a live TV channel. And
Mm,
so I appeared both in front of the camera, selling loads of products for major brands,
mhm,
and then them knowing that or realizing that I was a trainer, invited me to coach people, the guest presenters, not the presenters, but the guest presenters, who would be selling their various wares. And I suppose that's where it led me to what I do now, is I help people present themselves from a sales perspective in the best possible way. And in this age, and we're part of this age, this digital age, where we are presenting to camera, albeit on a computer monitor, but it's a television screen in essence. So this is mainly what I do. So my origin story is from love of words to understanding how to influence and persuade, and then being a coach to help people to influence and persuade. So
mm.
that's where we are today.
Yeah. Wow. How much of writing your own book played into or contributes to what you do professionally, right? Like this opportunity that you took, because I believe you're talking about your dad wanted to be a copywriter. Your brother picked up that torch, wasn't able to complete it. And then you picked up that torch and was able to carry it through. But how much of going through that commitment and that work of honoring, in a way, for your father's legacy and your brother's legacy contributes to what you do professionally?
I think, as I say, that it was reasonably linear.
Hmm.
There's a concept that kids, when they are at university or at school, that they have an idea of what they want to do. I don't think I had that idea. I know that that's where my dad wanted to be. And I suppose something in the back of my head was saying, go in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
And the misconception I was going to say is this: lots of people feel that you go for a goal. You set your goal and you go for it.
Mm-hmm.
Never happened with me. I had to try different things. And perhaps that's one of the life lessons I learned is try different things, move away from things that don't work for you rather than set your goal. And that's, we all live this portfolio career now, I think. And certainly that's true of me. So I think, yeah, it did have an impact, but the true impact and why I wrote the book came much, much later. I processed, to use that word, the loss of my dad as a child of 10, trying to make sense of it. It certainly impacted my relationship with men, because if my dad could leave me at that age, how could I trust other men? So that was certainly an impact on my life. But because of my career path, it allowed me to try different things. And I think the life lesson is just go for it. Look for the mentors, or perhaps recognize when the mentors come into your life. And I suppose that's evolved in what I do now, because I am a mentor to people. The writing of the book, and I didn't have the courage to write the book initially. I wrote a business book called Stand Up and Sell, which was my experience of QVC. But that gave me the confidence to say, I've got a deeper story to tell. And you and I know about positive intelligence and how mental fitness is absolutely key. So positive intelligence, the writing of this book, A Voyage Without My Father, all helped to say, right, if people have a fear of presentation, a fear of public speaking, then I've got the mechanisms that I can help them with. So it kind of all evolved out of that situation. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It does answer the question. As I'm thinking about you sharing kind of the need to try things and how, losing your dad at that young age and how you viewed that at that time, one thing I keep wondering about is the 10-year-old Dexter. You've lost your father. In your book, you mentioned, they said his heart just gave out, and your question, like, how does that work? What do you mean he's gone? If you could be the mentor to 10-year-old Dexter at that time, because you didn't have a mentor at that time, did you?
No.
Right. So if you could be mentor to 10-year-old Dexter, and you would commit to him for the next 5 years of being in his life on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, what are the things that you would try to impart on him or support him with as he's trying to process a world without his dad?
It's a very good question, because I think that at that time, in that unenlightened time, there wasn't the support for children that there is now.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens now is that when the child loses a parent at that kind of age, there's a recognition that what they feel is not a sense of loss, strangely enough. And we know that there are 7 levels of grief. The truest feeling at that time is anger. And so if I were to approach Dexter at that age and the age that I am now, I would allow that anger to be vented, to write it down. We know that journaling is very important, or to cut photographs or pieces out of the magazine and create a scrapbook of experience, not necessarily memories, because I had very few memories of my dad. That's how I would mentor, that's how I would counsel a child now, to obviously to talk about it and allow that anger to come through. As we were saying before we actually came on air, one of the experiences I had was that at the age of 45, which was around the time that my dad died, he was 45. So when I reached that age, I had a major crisis. I was driving along and I was listening to this song of The Living Years by Mike and the Mechanics. And one of the parts of it, and songs are very important to me, and the lyrics of songs are important. And I think that's how people can express themselves as well. And this lyric said, "I wasn't there that morning when my father passed away." And I found myself literally not able to see the road in front of me. I was driving to my office. I couldn't see the road in front of me for the tears that were flowing from my eyes. And I had to pull over. And I was just sobbing. And I thought, a man of 45, that shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't really still affect me. And so I went into therapy for about 18 months. And the sum total of that was, okay, you're angry at your father for dying, but what do you do with that? You've been given this, but what do you do with that? And so, and certainly related in the book, that was starting my voyage of discovery of what are the processes that allow the anger, the tension, the fear, all of those elements to come out. And so that's how I would coach my younger self, my 10-year-old self.
Wow. At 45, very successful, I'd assume by that time, but still moved by something that happened 35 years prior.
Yeah.
Well, what are some of the things that you learned during therapy? Because I think, especially in the community that I come from, we don't necessarily, I think it's well documented in terms of just the narrative. It's just like, I wasn't raised to be open to having therapy, right? I've even been told, hey, don't go down and give your money and tell your business to anybody. And I know that there's plenty of people listening who may not believe they need therapy because there isn't anything that they believe they're wrestling with. Maybe they haven't had that opportunity to sit at a light, listen to a song, and just burst into tears. What are some of the things that you learned while you were in therapy that were beneficial to your journey?
I recognize what you're saying, and I certainly agree with you. I think, that there's a concept that specifically for men, and that's, I wrote the book initially for men because, one of my favorite mantras is that vulnerability is not a weakness, it's a strength. And there is this phrase that we're brought up with, you must be mad to go to see a psychiatrist. And certainly I resisted that. But what I found, and thank God, as you say, I was married by then. I have twin sons. And what apart from that catalyst of and that tension that I found myself in the car, I got angry with the boys. No hitting, but I had the voice. I could get, really tough with the voice.
Yeah.
And I remember one Christmas that I got angry because one of them was crying about a toy. And they were about the same age that I was when I lost my dad. And I realized it was an overreaction. And I think that that's what made me stop and say, I need help, because that was an unrealistic reaction to something which was simple. And I know what was going on in my head was, how can you be crying about a toy when at that age I lost my dad, And so it came back. And I think that this is the whole purpose, hopefully, of our conversation, is that if there are people out there, men, women, whoever, who are still in grief, and they react to situations unfavorably or unrealistically, then go and seek help. The psychiatric part of it, the talking therapy, as they say, was only part of what helped me. It started my journey of this self-discovery, and we can talk about the mechanism that I really helped me, and it was part of what is known as Gestalt therapy, whereby you imagine yourself, and I have an acronym which I call MIC, and it's about meditation, and that doesn't have to be transcendental. It can be just very simple breathing control, which takes you to a deeper level. And once you're at that meditative level, so that's the M, you imagine that you are having a conversation with the person that has passed. And it may seem strange or silly, but you can do this. The mind is an incredible mechanism. It's what I call a time machine. So it can zap you back to that moment. And in my imagination, I stood in front of my father at his hospital bed and said to him, Dad, I'm angry with you for dying. So the C part, M is the meditation, I is the imagination, and C is the communication. So in my head, I communicated with him. And Gestalt therapy is about taking one part and then taking the other part. In actual, when they use it, they have two chairs, and you sit in one chair and then you move physically to the other chair, and you see the perspective from the other person's point of view. So that's what was going on in my head. And it was so releasing that when I came out of that situation, I felt a weight lifted off of my shoulders. So if you like, my key lesson for anybody who's listening, and they're going through still the grief, it doesn't matter how long ago it was, remember that they are never gone who live in our hearts and our minds. And so if we play this mind trick of having a conversation when we are at a quiet level, then hopefully people will find that releasing as well.
Meditation, imagination, communication. That's powerful. I wonder how we decide who we will be mad at when something tragic happens. And why is it anger? Right? For some people, it's the creator. And a tragic situation completely rips them from the connection they had with their creator. For others, in your case, in this scenario, it's you were angry with dad when dad didn't have a choice. Maybe, I mean, you never know. But I've had this too, where I've lost loved ones, and maybe I pointed to their lifestyle choices, and I allowed me to be angry with them, and also maybe keep me from caring at the level that I really needed to, because I'm just angry, right? You quit. You decided this path. You wanted to leave. Why do you think that is?
I think that it is, first of all, an honest feeling. And I think that, we have to be honest to ourselves, because we know that when we hold that tension in our bodies, it doesn't do us any good. And so be honest with that. And it is, I am very process driven. And so grief is a process.
Yeah.
And it isn't a linear process. Something can happen, a smell, a color, a taste can zap you right way back to that moment. And as I said, it's like our brains are time machines. So be legitimately angry, but we can't say, why me?
Yeah.
Because it is in the scheme of things. And I suppose this is the other way that I dealt with it. Many years later, going through it at that time, it was just pure emotion. And some of it was, I can't believe that's happened to me. So that the anger, the belief, the acceptance is all part of that process. So we can't say, God, why did you do that to me? What we have to do is take the position of saying, okay, what do I do with that? What do I do with that feeling? And sometimes, and it not when you're going through it, but I think, and again, it's part of this positive intelligence aspect, is what is the gift that relationship has given me? What is the life lesson I can learn? From a business perspective, I was on a symposium with a number of angel investors. And a couple of the things that they said, which really resonated with me, was that that people who fail are the most bankable because they've been through an experience. And I think it's true of also loss, of grief, if, and we're not just talking about somebody who's taken from us from death, but it could be suicide, it could be abandonment. And so we have the right to be angry. We have the right to say, why me? But then from a position standing back from that, when we can do that, is what is the gift that person has given me? Certainly in terms of my father, what's the gift of him dying? The gift is that now I have written that book. Hopefully it's going to help people that are also going through that. What's the gift of this pandemic that so many people have died? From my perspective, and it's only my perspective, it has brought the scientific world together to create vaccines in record time. It has given us a much more acute feeling for family, how important families and relationships are. And the third element is perhaps a greater respect for nature and the nature around us, because when we were locked down and then released, the joy of just walking in the park. And so, that's an extreme case. What good has the pandemic given us with so many countless people having been lost? We have to look at it from a different perspective. And it's the perspective of actually Greek philosophy of the Stoics, that the only thing that we have control over is our own reaction to any given situation. And that sometimes happens much later, as it did with me.
Yeah. How did losing your father at a young age, how did it shift or impact how you lived and developed your own children?
Interesting. The way certainly the essence of it was that because my father was not there for me at those really important times, the school sports days, my mother and brother were working hard to keep the family together from a financial aspect. So they weren't there to cheer me on. And ringing in my ears when I could hear the other parents saying, "Come on, George, come on, John," but nobody was shouting, "Come on, Dex." So it made me, I was going to say resilient. I think kids are resilient. If children weren't resilient, every time they fell over trying to learn to walk, they wouldn't get up again. Right. So I think it taught me resilience, but it was hard. And then, as you've asked, how did it affect my relationship with my boys? I was there. I was there at their sports days. I was there when they were at concerts, singing on stage or acting. I just made it sometimes in detriment to my own career. And often you hear very successful men saying, I wish I spent more time, and women, I wish I spent more time with my family. And the reverse was for me. I wanted to spend as much time with my kids, my wife, as possible, because I didn't have that myself. And it comes back to haunt us because, my dad was not there when I was confirmed. My dad was not there when I got married. My dad was not there when my kids were born. So I made sure that I was there. And thank God, my sons are there for their kids. It's so important. So if one thing has come out from my grief and my growth and my gratitude for what my dad left with me, which was this making sure that the family were right, that certainly has been transmitted to my boys.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. How did you find positive psychology? And what is that for people who don't know?
Positive intelligence, mental
fitness.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Because it is a psychological aspect. There it is.
There was my mistake. That's my first mistake of the day.
But you're right. It is a lot of psychology, and it's based on neuroscientific research. And the essence of it is that, as we've just been speaking about, that everything happens for a reason, so that we need to find the gift in that situation. But the essence of it is, and certainly I had this in my head, the voices in our head that tell us that we're going to make a fool of ourselves, that we're going to fail, that whatever we try to do, it's not going to work out right. And so what this positive intelligence, this mental fitness aspect, is to turn down the volume of those judgmental voices, those aspects of ourselves that we have learnt or had thrust upon us by teachers, by parents, by whoever through our life, and to face that and say, actually, those no longer hold true. They are lies that our saboteurs, our judgmental voice is telling us. And then the other side is to turn up the volume on being more empathetic with people, discovering who we are, exploring who we are, having a purpose, and taking focused action. And those elements, and there are more, but those elements are what they call the sage aspect. So it's the difference between the judgmental voice, which decries us, and the sage voice, which says we still can move ahead. And it's about ease and flow. It's not hard work. It shouldn't be hard work, because, when, and I'm sure you have found this, sometimes when we relax back, when we step back from a situation which is causing us stress, then actually things happen easier. And the example I always give is this, when you're watching a TV program and you see an actor or an actress and you think, where have I seen them before? And then you work through the alphabet, you try then remember their names and you can't. And then something else, you do something else. And then suddenly the name comes back to you. Well, this is the same kind of process, that don't listen to those negative voices, turn down the volume, and the sage aspect will come forward.
And is that a practice? Is there a process that someone needs to go through to perhaps maybe even evaluate what are these negative voices, where do they come from, and how do I get rid of them? And then also,
yes, there is.
Right. So what's that process?
The process initially, because it is part of a 6-week course,
okay.
And as a practitioner, then I run these pods. They call them pods. They're a number of people. We try to limit it to 5 or 6 people, because we find then people can be honest and talk about their experiences. But the key thing is that on Positive Intelligence, on the website, there are 2 surveys. There's one which is called the Saboteur Assessment, which is a number of questions which identify the numbers which relate to aspects of ourselves. And there's 9 um, saboteurs, which is not who we are, but there are elements of us. So to give you an example, my top saboteur is a stickler, which means that I perceive everything as a perfectionist. I have to get things, or had to get things 100% right. And actually, we know perfection is for God. It is not for us, us mere mortals. So it allows us to step back and say, 70% is enough, because then the rest is a learning experience. So first of all, we identify that. And then there's what they call the PQ score, which is our, if you like, our happiness quotient. And it shows it as almost like a turbine, if you like. And then it assesses where we are, again, by a percentage of how happy we are with our lives. And I say it like that because it ostensibly is for our occupation, but so much of it is about how we react to things personally. So it builds our personal life as well as our commercial life. So I hope that's given some indication. If anybody is interested, we can certainly discuss it further. But initially, if they go on to the Positive Intelligence site and do those two assessments, then we can always discuss how they move forward from there. But it's life-changing. And because it works on the neuroscientific aspect of the brain, so creating different pathways, then it takes us away from how we always think to how we think more creatively and more effectively.
Wow. I was listening to a speaker one time, and he was talking about how our psychology, and he said something of the nature that most people have highways to anger, frustration, and all of those emotions, and dirt roads to happiness. Right, where we've been thinking one way for so long that we get there in a split second. But as it relates to trying to create the emotions that we really want in our life, we don't visit it often enough. And so it's this off-beaten path that's undeveloped.
Yes. And that is such a great analogy, because, the well-trod path also creates a rut.
Yes.
And all sometimes we need to do is to go take that fork in the road and say, let's clear away what we think are brambles and almost like, the fairy stories where you have to hack away at the undergrowth to get through. Sometimes it's just to take a brush and move it aside and start creating that new pathway. I love that. I think that's a really good way of describing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Was there anything that you gained professionally from going through therapy?
I think in truth, the psychotherapy took me to one point. And as I said, it was about understanding where the anger comes from and who I was angry with. I think that meditation, visualization was really the key that unlocked the other aspects, because from a religious aspect, it's called the still small voice within us, and sometimes that voice is us. That is that voice of reason, and I think that often, because of the busy world we live in, we don't allow that voice to come through, and that voice, when we trust it, is very wise. It's born out of experience. It's born out of understanding how the world works. So I think that, yes, you can do the talking stuff, but find what works for you. That's what I had to do. I did various things called, was called the Silver Mind Control Method. But the concept of mind controlling somebody else's mind. So it's now called the Silver Method. And that was my first introduction to meditation. And as I say, it wasn't transcendental. It was a very simple way of breathing, eyes closed, and to take us to a different level. And there are aspects of that in positive intelligence where the visualization happens. Then I was involved with a healing group where we would imagine that we were helping people through prayer or just imagining. There was other elements of Reiki where we understand that there are certain energies in the world that as long as we are the conduit for those energies, we are able to help people. So I did a lot of introspection, a lot of reading, a lot of practical trials of different things. We spoke previously about a Ouija board.
Yes. Will you tell us that story?
Well, I will use it without the expletives, if I may.
Right, right.
But certainly my mother, God rest her soul, when my dad died, she went to a spiritualist. And he said, there is a way to communicate with those that have passed. And the Ouija board, we didn't actually have the board. We just cut out numbers and letters, and we arranged it around the table, and we turned a glass, and everybody, and as a family, we did this. We put our fingers on it and asked it questions, which I don't suggest people do. There are many religious reasons why we shouldn't do that. But what evolved was that we were told that if we go into a darkened room like a seance, then my uncle, who was supposedly very familiar and therefore was able to channel these things. And we had two cones, literally like dunce's caps, put in. And what would happen is that he would go into a trance state, and through these cones, a voice would actually come, and it would be the voice of my father. So we sat in this darkened room, just sitting round on the chairs, and he'd suddenly slumped in his chair. There was deep breathing, and he's in the trance, and we're sitting there in the dark, and we could hear this knocking noise. And then I realized it was my knees knocking against the chair. I was terrified. And then suddenly, and we said, something's happening. And then he opened his eyes and he said, "What the is going on here?" And we realized he hadn't gone into a trance, he'd just fallen asleep. So that was our experience. We never went in that direction again, but oh dear me. So so we tried different things. I think it's as I said before, with my career I had to try different things, and the therapies, the ways through, the way through from grief, you need to try different things.
As I listen to that and I listen to your story and your journey, I think what it really brings to the surface is our need to connect and to stay connected, not only with our loved ones that we've lost, but that process of therapy is really about connecting with yourself too, and understanding, why are you hurt? Why are you angry? Why are you sad? Why are you happy? What brings happiness? What brings joy? What are the feelings of love that are present or missing? And how do you just connect? We're wired for connection. And even when we use words or attitudes that repel connection, the message that we're really trying to work through and present is we want to connect. And what you're describing, whether it be from, I tried a lot of things too, 17 jobs in 11 years after leaving college. I was just trying things. I didn't know specifically what I was going to do, but essentially that process of going through everything was to try to connect to something professionally, right? And getting to a point or getting through grief in many ways, as you explain it, through therapy and maybe even through some of the positive intelligence, trying things. It's really trying to connect and reconnect and stay connected.
I think the one lesson that this pandemic has taught us is that we need to communicate. We need to communicate more effectively.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be able to say to people, be honest with them. I unfortunately lost a very close friend a few months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And he's still very much a part of our lives. We keep on quoting things that he said. And I said, I created a video, which I sent out to on LinkedIn, and which I said, have you told the people that are around you that you love them, that you respect them, that they are important to you? Because we don't do that. And equally, it's important in a measured way to say, I'm unhappy with our relationship. I'm unhappy with things that are happening. And, it's very interesting. I was watching the news today, and Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have come over here to see the Queen. Now, I'm not particularly a royalist, but they haven't seen her for a long time, and she's obviously been very unwell. And so in situations like that, even when there has been a parting of the ways and some real anger and regret, don't leave it like that. Because if you don't visit people, if you don't have that conversation, then that regret will build up. It happened to me. And that's why I'm saying be brave. Don't worry about being vulnerable, because it will help you, it will heal you, and it will heal others. So communicate. That's my key message, really. Communicate.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And as we, wrap up for the day, is there anything else that you want to leave with our listeners on life, processing?
It's really what, and you are the prime example of what it is important, that do not think that, well, I suppose the key message is life is too short. It's very fragile. So don't leave things. If you're not happy where you are, then find a way out. Try different things. I was recently speaking to a number of MBA students, and one of the revelations for them was what we had talked about, was to say, you don't have to have a goal. You can try different things. And it's like a jacket. Try, see if the jacket looks good on you. Does it feel right? And so both with people and with career, try different things. And so that I think is the message I would like. Life is too short to stay in a place which doesn't help you. Be kind to people. Don't hurt them. Be honest with people. And once again, that MIC, use a meditative way. I was speaking to a gentleman, his name is Dr. Binay Singh, and he lives in Odessa in Ukraine. And he is such a profoundly peaceful person. And every morning for 15 minutes, he meditates. He goes to a deeper level, and he plans in his head, he plans his day, or just relaxes down. And then he says that during the day, he thinks, he doesn't listen to the news, which I think is very interesting. And what he says is that whatever happens today, and I love what you said, that, so far, so good, no mistake. And it was the same with him. Every moment, every hour, that's good. Made it through for another hour. So ease and flow. That's what I would say. Don't be hard on yourself. Take the ease and flow, and you will be amazed. Meditation, imagination, communication, and be kind to yourself.
I love that. That's a gift. Everything that happens in our life is a gift. And I believe that us connecting and getting the opportunity to share stories back and forth, and then being able to have this podcast that I can share with people that, are going through maybe grief in their personal life or their professional life, and being able to point them to the Picasso of presentations. It's an honor, and I appreciate you being with me today.
It's been my delight, my honor that you invited me in the first place, that to give me this opportunity to share my experiences, which I hope resonates with people, and they have the courage, and it does sometimes take courage, to say, this is not right. I need to do something about it. So, I really do appreciate it. It's been my honor to sit and chat with you. So thank you.
Yeah, you too. Well, have a good rest of your day, okay?
You too. You take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye.